So what is caste really? I mean, we hear the word all the time, and we know it impacts millions of lives, relationships, even opportunities across India. But where did it actually come from? Is it some ancient, unchangeable fact of life? Or is it something that people built? And if we built it, how on earth did we do it? Well, today, we're going to try and get some answers by diving into the brilliant analysis of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar to understand this system from the ground up.
All right, let's really get into it, because the truth is, caste is a giant puzzle. For centuries, people have tried to crack it. Some say it's about race, others say, no, it's just about a division of labor, or maybe it's purely a religious thing. But according to Dr. Ambedkar, all of those answers, they just don't quite fit. They don't explain what makes the caste system in India so unique and, honestly, so incredibly stubborn. So to solve this puzzle, we first have to understand what we're even looking at.
And this is where Dr. Ambedkar's genius really shines. He just cuts right through all that confusion with one single, powerful idea. He tells us to stop thinking about caste as just a ladder, a social hierarchy. Instead, he wants us to see it as something way more confining. He describes it as a kind of mysterious cage.
The term he used was an enclosed class. Okay, so picture this. Society is made up of different groups, right? You've got your teachers, your soldiers, your merchants. Now, in a normal class system, those groups have open doors. So a merchant's kid can decide to study and become a teacher. No big deal. But a caste, Ambedkar says, is a class that has slammed its doors shut and locked them. Once you're born in, you can't get out, and nobody from the outside can get in. It is literally a social cage.
And this right here is the absolute key difference. Look, a class system might have its problems, for sure, but it allows for movement. Your skills, your education, your hard work, they can actually change your position in life. But in a caste system, nope. Your status is fixed the second you're born. It's like a permanent label stamped on you, and it doesn't matter how rich or how smart you become, you can never, ever erase it. Which, of course, brings up a huge question. If it's a cage, how is it locked? What is it that's keeping those doors sealed so tightly?
Okay, so if we're going with this idea that caste is a system of locked social cages, then there has to be a lock, right? There must be some single, powerful mechanism that keeps everybody in their box. And you know what? It turns out the answer isn't some big, complicated secret. It's actually been hiding in plain sight this whole time.
Yeah, that's it. Marriage. The entire system, this huge, complicated thing that has shaped millions of lives for centuries, it all comes down to one thing: who you're allowed to marry. This is the master lock. This is what holds the whole cage together.
Now, there's a specific word for this: endogamy. It's the strict, absolutely unbreakable rule that you must marry someone from your own caste. Think about it. If you stop people from different groups from having families together, you stop those groups from ever mixing. You make sure that every caste stays separate, a little self-contained bubble, generation after generation after generation. This isn't just, a social preference. It is the fundamental law that gives the entire system its power.
But this is where the logic of the system takes a really dark and honestly a horrifying turn. Because if you're going to enforce this strict rule of marrying within the group, you run into a very real practical problem. What do you do when the numbers just don't add up? What happens if a caste has more women who can get married than men, or the other way around? Well, the solutions that the system came up with, they were absolutely monstrous.
So Dr. Ambedkar pointed out that some of the most barbaric practices we know of weren't just random acts of cruelty. No, they were cold, calculated solutions to this problem of surplus people. For example, if a husband died, his widow suddenly became a surplus woman. She was a problem because she might break the rule of endogamy. The so-called solution: burn her on her husband's pyre, the practice of sati. Or you could just force her into a life of shame and misery so no one would ever think of marrying her. And what about surplus men? What if there were too many of them? Well, the solution for that was child marriage. You marry very young girls to much older men. That way, you make sure no man in the caste is left without a wife, which stops him from looking for one outside the group. These things, they weren't bugs in the system. They were features. They were designed to maintain the purity of a caste, no matter the human cost.
So this all leads to the next obvious question, right? Who on earth would design a system like this? Was there some grand meeting, a big conspiracy? How did this idea spread across an entire subcontinent? Ambedkar's theory on this it's fascinating. He says it wasn't a command from on high. It was more like a social contagion.
He argues it all started with the Brahmins, the priestly class. See, to protect their elite status, they were the first ones to enclose themselves, to create these super strict rules about only marrying each other. And then what happened? Well, other powerful groups saw the prestige the Brahmins got from this, and they started copying them.
The warriors, the merchants, they all started building their own walls to make themselves feel superior to the next group down. And Ambedkar called this an infection of imitation. It was like a chain reaction that just tumbled down through society until every single group, right down to the very bottom, had locked itself away in its own caste. And that's how you get the rigid, oppressive pyramid that we're still dealing with today.
All right, so let's recap. We've seen the cage, we've found the key that locks it, and we've even traced how it might have started. Now, if you followed Ambedkar's logic this far, his solution becomes incredibly, almost shockingly, simple and direct. So, how do you break a system that's built entirely on one single rule?
Well, you break the rule. It's that simple. If the entire foundation of this whole oppressive thing is endogamy, this absolute refusal to marry outside your group, then the most powerful weapon you have against it is its exact opposite, inter-caste marriage. For Ambedkar, this wasn't some fuzzy, feel-good idea. It was the only logical conclusion. It is the one and only act that directly attacks the engine that keeps the system running. It literally dissolves the boundaries, it mixes people together, and over time, it makes the whole idea of separate, locked groups totally pointless.
And this, really, brings us to the final, most important point of all. The caste system, it isn't a force of nature. It's not some divine command from the heavens. It is a man-made structure, a system of division that was designed, built, and maintained by people. And that leaves us with a really profound, and I think an urgent question. If this cage was built by human hands, can it also be broken by them? And that right there is the challenge Dr. Ambedkar leaves for every single one of us.